some issues beyond my control. But we are back now, and we'll be having our class today. So we will be continuing the curriculum today, and we are going to be talking about something very interesting, which is going to be we are going to be talking about governance today. So I'll share my screen and the slide, and then we can start. So please kindly confirm if my screen is visible, and then let me put it on full screen. So can anyone confirm if my screen is visible? Anyone? Can you see my screen? Please, I need a response.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
All right. So we'll just start now, and then we'll try and round up as much as possible. So tomorrow we'll be rounding up our chapter 1, and we'll be taking a quiz, just a 10-question quiz to track what we have done. And then I'm going to share a document that's going to show us the summary of what we have covered so far. Alright, so without wasting too much of our time, so we go straight into the discussion of the day. So today we are going to be talking about governance in cybersecurity, and the title of this module is Understand Governance Elements and Processes. So we have very few objectives, and it's just for us to be able to distinguish between the elements of governance, which are the policy, procedure, standard, regulation, and law, and then also for us to be able to demonstrate a relationship between these elements. All right, so we'll just go straight into it, and then we'll get to understand it. So what are governance elements? All right, so just as we've been talking about when we started this course, when we started this training, our aim is for us to become, I believe the goal of each and every one of us is to have a foundational knowledge of cybersecurity with the aim of becoming a cybersecurity professional. So, and if you are going to become a cybersecurity professional, so that means you are going to be working in an organization. Okay, and any particular organization you are going to work in exists because of a reason, right? They didn't just wake up and open the organization because of nothing. There's a purpose for that organization to exist. So be it a manufacturing company, be it a software development company, be it a bank, a construction company, a company that provide goods and services, telecommunication company, fintechs, banks, educational institutions, whatever, they all have their purpose that they are going to, that they want to, that they would like to achieve with the organization, right? And then which will of course bring revenue and bring profit depending on the type of organization. And also you have some non-governmental organization, but they have a purpose. Okay, we have their UNICEF, their UNDP, and the likes, on other types of NGOs. So they have a purpose which they are trying to fulfill. And for them to be able to fulfill this purpose, they are making use of some IT information, some IT resources. They make use of all these things. So it's important to understand the objective, then understand how IT applies, and then we will now be able to come in and make our informed decision. So governance is more like it's not I call it the administrative aspect of cybersecurity, because it deals with documentation, uh, policies, guidelines, and stuff like that. So that is what it's mostly about. So then for us to be able to complete this objective of that particular organization, so I'm going back to the purpose and objective of an organization. So for them to be able to achieve this purpose, decisions have to be made, right? So rules have to be stated. You have to define your practice, so which is going to now give us policies and procedure which are going to be in place to guide the organization in pursuit of achieving their goals. So the same way, while they are achieving their goals, it's also very important to take cybersecurity into consideration. So that is what this particular module is going to be talking about. So governance element. So when management in organization implement system and structure that the organization will use to achieve their goals, they are guided by laws and regulation, okay, which is created by government. So what do I mean by this? For example, let's say if you want to start a bank today, right, you know that your regulator is going to be the Central Bank of Nigeria. So you cannot open a bank without getting an approval from the Central Bank of Nigeria, for example. So that is the regulator. There are laws of the land which has been established, okay, and the mandate has been given to CBN to enforce the law, which make them the regulator. So they provide you laws and regulation to guide your activities. So the same thing with telecommunication with telecommunication companies, okay, we have NCC that regulates them. So law and regulation guides the development of standard which cultivate policy and then which result in procedure. So let me just explain this. So there are laws which has been made by this regulatory body, right? So for companies or for organizations to comply to these laws, okay, so the law can be a local law, it can be an international law. Okay, so for an organization to comply to those laws, right? Some people now say, okay, let's develop a standard, okay, which is going to conform to the law and regulation which has been created, which has been established. Okay, so it's from this standard now. It's from this standard that some people now created that organization will now go and take and build their policies. Okay, so policy is like a set of rules which state what you have to do in an organization. Then we now have procedure, which will now result into procedures. So procedures are like step-by-step guide on what you need to do and how you need to do it. So you can see they are all related. So what we are going to be talking about today is to break down this key component that I've mentioned. Where is my marker? All right. So the main aim of this particular class now is to break down this element. So the first one here is the law and regulation, which guides the development of standard. So standard is the next one here, and then which cultivates or which you can use to develop your policies. So policy is the other one, and then the last one is procedure. So we are going to handle them one after the other. So how are they related? So let's take it down to the top again. So procedures, like I said, are detailed steps to complete a task that support our departmental organization policy. So for example, let's say an organization have a password policy, right? So let me take the policy now. Policy are put in place by organization, blah blah blah, to provide guidelines on activities to ensure that they support industry standard. So that's that. So policy, for example, so let's say an organization have a password policy, right? So a password policy will state that will just tell you what you have to do, but it won't tell you how to do it. So for example, a password policy, for example, will say all users are expected to have a minimum of to have a password with minimum of 8 characters, which contain uppercase, lowercase, and stuff like that, right? Okay, the policy will not even tell you it contains uppercase, just tell you you have expected to have minimum of 8 characters password, right? Then they will tell you have to change your password every 30 days. Okay, so for example, let's stay with those two. So that's a policy. Then the procedure will now tell you the detailed step to complete that task. So how do I create a password that's having 8 characters and is strong? So procedure will now tell you, okay, for you to be able to create a password that is very strong, you are expected to have 8 characters there. You are expected to have a uppercase, a lowercase, and caps and special characters in it for you to be able to accept it. Then the procedure can also tell you every 30 days you are expected to change this password. How do you change it? You have to click on this, you have to do this, you have to do that. So that's procedure. So procedure gives you a step-by-step on how to complete a task, whereby policies are actually put in place by organization management. In this case, they are referred to them as governance, organization management, okay, such as the executive management, to provide guidance on all activities. So that is policy, and then you can have different type of policy depending on the organization that you find yourself. All right, then now we have standard. So standard are often used by governance team to provide a framework. So now for your management to be able to come up with proper policy, they need to look at a particular standard. There is a standard that all organizations are expected to meet, right? And then for you to meet that organization, because for people not to be doing things the way they like or anyhow they want it, that's why we have standard. So standard will tell you, the standard is in form of a framework that will tell you the minimum things that are required for you to be able to, for your information, for example, so for your cybersecurity posture to be efficient, for example. So let's say we are talking about a cybersecurity standard. So if your organization is trying to come up with a policy, they consult a standard. Okay, so the standard will now provide a guide. So because it's a framework, so it will now provide a guide on how to introduce those policies, and then of course to now have your procedures from the policy. Okay, and then we now have so the last one we're going to talk about are regulations. So just like I said previously, they are in form of law and is usually from government. Okay, so not to be confused. So in this case, don't let us confuse government with governance. Governance that we are referring to here is the governance of the organization, but now government now is the government, the people that are controlling the land, people that make policy, right? So those are regulations. Okay, and then if you are not doing what is in line with the regulation, you are going to be fined, right? There's a fine attached to there's a fine that is going to be attached to there's a fine that's going to be attached to any breach that you do or that you carried out, that you are found culpable of. So let me put it that way. So if you are found culpable of any breach, then you are going to pay. So not to waste too much time on this, you'll get a proper understanding when we go deeper into it. So we start with regulation. So regulation and law. So we have different type of regulation and law that guide cybersecurity. Okay, and in some cases you may find a bit of overlap between regulation and standard, most especially when we are talking about especially when the PCI DSS overlap the two in some instances, which I'm going to explain as we proceed. So just like I said, regulations are usually associated with fines and penalties that can be imposed by government at national, regional, or local level. Okay, so just have it at the rest of your mind that if there's any breach of a regulation, compliance, or a law requirement, it's going to come in form. There's going to be consequences, right? You're going to be fined. You're going to be penalized. Okay, because regulation and law can be imposed and enforced. So it can be at local level, it can be at national level, it can be at regional level, it can even be at international level, which I will explain, right? It can be at international level. So we have different type of such regulations that you must conform to as a cybersecurity, that you have to be familiar with as a cybersecurity professional, and also organizations, depending on what they do and where they are located, are expected to comply to such regulations. So one of the most popular is the GDPR, that's General Data Protection Regulation, okay, which we also have an equivalent in Nigeria, which we call the NDPR, that's the National Data Protection Regulation. Okay, so from this image I got online, we have a California Consumer Privacy Act, we have the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and then we have the PCI DSS. So we're going to talk about this and also the ones that are local to us so that we get a proper understanding. So let's start with GDPR. So what is GDPR? So GDPR is a regulation that came into effect in 2018, and it applies to all business operating in in the European Union. So it's a regulation made by the European Union to protect the privacy and right of citizens to their personal data. Okay, so that is what GDPR does. So, and all businesses are expected to comply to GDPR, and if there is a breach, they are expected to report it within 72 hours of becoming aware of them. And if this is not reported, there's going to be a fine. And even if they report it and it has the rule, it's a very large document, right? So the guidelines are there. What you stand to lose is going to be there, so you get to see it, and then you are expected to implement it in a particular organization. So if you want to be an expert on GDPR, for example, if you are not in Nigeria, if maybe you work in Europe, UK, or any other country that is under the European Union, even though UK is no longer part of the European Union, but they still use GDPR in the UK. So that's one of the examples. So GDPR is a regulation that takes care of privacy and also the protection of personal data of European Union citizens. Okay, anywhere they are located, even if your organization, for example, let's say you have an organization in Nigeria, but you process data of European citizens, right? You still have to comply to GDPR, okay, because it's actually to protect the privacy right of EU citizens. So you must comply to GDPR, even if you are in the US, but you are processing. So, for example, let's say Facebook is it's not an European company, right? But because they collect European citizen data, they have to also compare to GDPR. So that's a proper example of. So this one I'm not going to waste too much time on it. It's also a type of Privacy Act, very similar to GDPR, but it's localized in California. So California Consumer Privacy Act. So I'll not waste too much time on that, and then so we go straight to the next one, which is more popular. So this is for the health sector. Most organizations abroad in the health sector use this. I'm not aware if I don't think we are using this in Nigeria yet, but maybe not. But it's simple. So what the HIPAA is all about is a law that applies to businesses that handle protected information. So if you are a clinic, and health insurance provider, pharmacist, whatever, if you deal with health and personal health information of your client, you have to comply to HIPAA, right? It's designed to protect privacy and security of protected health information. So it also requires business to implement appropriate security measures. So same as GDPR and the California Act and this HIPAA, they recommend appropriate security measures, right, for organizations to implement to protect the protected health information of their clients or of their customers. So if in any case there's a data breach or there's an hack, it has to be reported within 60 days of becoming aware of them. There are also other processes that are also involved. But the main message here is that HIPAA is required for businesses or any organization that deal with protected health information, or PHI as the case may be. So it has its own security measures which you are expected to implement to make sure that you protect those information. So that is for HIPAA. And then the next one is PCI DSS. So as you can see, I put it under regulation, right? But it's coming. It's a standard. So it's like an overlap between a regulation and a standard. So why is it a regulation? It's a regulation because it's a must. If your organization is going to process or store credit card information, your organization must comply to PCI DSS. If you are not compliant to PCI DSS, or you go against any of their regulations and rules, you will not be allowed, or your bank or your organization will not be allowed to process or store card payment, right, or card information. So that's why it's a bit of an overlap between the two. So it's a standard in the actual sense, but it's in form of a regulation, right? So it's in form of a regulation because it's mandatory. Okay, it's not optional. You have to have it for you to process card payment. So it is designed to protect the privacy and security of credit card information. So our ATM cards, our debit cards, for countries that use credit card. So for you to be able to issue it, for you to be able to process it, you must comply to PCI DSS. So it also requires business to implement appropriate security measures to protect credit card information from unauthorized use. So if you don't have those appropriate security measures, you will not be your organization will be said to that they are not compliant to PCI DSS. So that's why if you see any of your banks, when you see their banners or you see their cards, you just see it somewhere, you're going to see it that PCI DSS compliant. So it's a must for them to have it. So it also requires businesses to report data breaches to payment card brands within 72 hours. So for example, if there's a breach on a VAV card or on a MasterCard, it has to be reported to them by the banks or the business that is using it within 72 hours of becoming aware of them. So, but the only difference now is that PCI DSS may not come with fine. PCI DSS cannot fine you, but they can revoke your license, right? They can revoke your certificate. So that's that about that. So that's why it's like an interlap between regulation and standard. So now let's go to our own now. So in Nigeria, we also have a data protection act that protects the privacy of the people, okay, in Nigeria. So that is NDPR. It applies to any organization that stores or processes the data of Nigerian citizens or residents. So as you can see, it's quite different from the GDPR. GDPR is for the European citizens and wherever they are, whereby this is the NDPR is for Nigerian citizens and their residents. But NDPR now said, okay, since most of the requirements of NDPR are closely similar to GDPR, so part of the NDPR framework is that for organizations that are not resident in Nigeria, if they are not complying to NDPR, then they must comply to GDPR. So that is how Nigeria is able to solve the problem of ambiguity. So any country that is having GDPR or a data protection law, that if it's applied there, okay, yes, so of course you can process the data of Nigerian citizens. So that is that about that. So the NDPR gives Nigerian rights over our data, and it requires organizations to handle data securely. So now we have a commission now. Before NDPR used to be under NITDA. I'm sure we all know NITDA. NITDA is a National Information Technology Development Agency, which is headed by a DG. Okay, so NITDA is in charge of coming up with regulation framework to guide the Nigerian IT space. So before NDPR used to be resident with them, but now they have their own commission. But all you can see most organizations right now in Nigeria are compliant to NDPR. Okay, so NDPR, so for us to understand, because it's local and we should be able to relate more to it, so I provided more information about the NDPR. So NDPR was actually passed in 2019, right? It was set up in 2019, but the act was passed last year in 2023. So which gave birth to the commission, that's Nigerian Data Protection Commission, which is headed by a commissioner. Okay, so it has it's an entity now. So the NDPR requires to report breaches that pose a risk to the right and freedom of data subjects, e.g. financial loss or identity theft. So if For example, if there's a breach at a particular bank, I don't want to mention name, and it has been established that some customers may become a victim of identity theft after the breach has successfully taken place, then it must be reported to NDPC within 72 hours of discovering that particular breach. So if it's failure to report it, will lead to a fine, which NDPC is going to fine that particular organization. So I believe, yeah, if we are very conversant with news, you must have seen that last year a couple of organizations were fined by the NDPC immediately after they started operating. So they've started fining companies for negligence. They can fine companies for other, not just breaches. For example, if a company you have your data with share it with another company illegally or without your consent, and NDPC finds out, they can also find them. And also NDPC has been working with NIDA and another organization known as FCCPC in Nigeria to address this issue of loan apps that we are currently having in the country, because it's actually a breach of privacy. If someone should call, if you should borrow money from an app and then they call another person to say this person borrowed 2,000 naira from us and is here to return it, it's actually a breach of your privacy. And for some of those loan apps, you can see on the news that some are being shut down, some are being fined. So depending on how severe their infringement is, but that is the whole essence of this thing. So you can also see that of recent, all the type of message, or you can see your email, you get to see marketing emails, even though you didn't register on anybody's newsletter, you can see that it has reduced now. You get to see those emails less. So that is one of what NDPR has been able to help us with. So we should thank the government for putting that in place. So these are countries that have privacy regulation worldwide. So this is the map of the world. This is the source where I got this from. We can see Nigeria is green. Because we have a legislation. So some have drafts. You can see the draft is those that are faint. The green is not very green like this country. I'm not sure which country is this, but they are not. So, and then the red ones are countries that doesn't have any type of regulation, any type of privacy regulation in their country, or legislation as the case may be in their country. But all the green part are where it has been legislated, and you can see our country is here, which is very green. So this is the source if you want to fact check the information I have here. Alright, so we go to the next slide. So it's common to be subjected to regulation on several levels. So you may be subjected to NDPR, you may be subjected to PCI DSS, you may be subjected to GDPR and some other regulations that may be in place, right? So multinational organizations are subjected to regulation in more than one nation. So because multinational, we know what multinational means. So companies that are located in different countries, like Shell, like PwC, and the likes. So they have offices or branch in almost every part of the world. And if you kind of find yourself in that particular environment, you will not say that because Shell is a UK company, we are not going, or is a US company, I'm not sure, I think it's UK or US, because it's from this country, we are not going to comply to your NDPR. It's not possible. So far they are in Nigeria, the unit in Nigeria, the Shell in Nigeria must comply to NDPR in addition to GDPR. But the one in USA can just be complying to GDPR or whatever law they have in that particular company. So if there is a Shell in California, for example, now, in addition to them complying to GDPR, they also have to comply to that California Privacy Act that I gave you, for example. So depending on the environment, so that's why it's important as experts, as cybersecurity. So we have a field, or I call it field? Yes, like a field in cybersecurity that handles this. So that's what we call the GRC, the governance, regulation, and compliance aspect. So those are people. So if you want to be an expert in that particular field, you need to know all this regulation. You need to know which one your company is for. For example, if you are the group CISO of that particular organization, that's the group CISO, you are in managing everything. So you have to know, if you are going to Nigeria, we have to be compliant to NDPR. If you are going to Ghana, we have to comply to whatever they have there. So that's very important. So organizations also need to consider the regulation that apply to their business at all levels. So depending on the type of business you're doing, so you have to comply to all the regulations that may be applicable to the line of business you are doing. Okay, so that you will not incur fines, which is going to, of course, come in form of financial liability to your organization. So that's why it's very important. So that's why you see organizations are actually recruiting for this particular aspect, because the fines are not small, right? If you are GDPR fines a huge amount of money, and even in Nigeria, NDPR fines big. The fines are very big, because if the fines are not big, company will play with it. So the fines are big, it's a large sum, and organization make sure that they comply to those regulations. So the next thing we are going to be talking about is standard. So organizations use multiple standards as part of their information system security program. So standard covers a range of issues, right? Standard will look at vulnerabilities on. Standard will look at a problem, right? And then give you what you have to do to make sure that you solve that problem. Well, we'll give you a framework for you to be able to solve that problem. And in some cases, these standards are actually built with regulations at the back of your mind, right? So, for example, okay, let me give us the example now, so that we don't get confused. So we have different type of standards, okay, for different type of scenario, right? So we have standard that can allow you to make sure that you are compliant to NDPR. We have standard that will make sure that you are compliant to GDPR, okay, and the likes, whereby regulations like PCI DSS, already I told you, they are also in form of standard. So they have their requirements that you must meet before you will be compliant. So don't confuse. So we have different type of standards, and the most popular are the NIST, ISO 20701. We have a whole lot of ISO. We have COBIT, we have CIS, GDPR, for example, but it's more of a regulation than a standard. All right, so we'll just talk about the ISO standard. So you must have been seeing ISO 20701, ISO 27100, and a whole lot of them. So ISO means International Organization for Standardization, right? So they develop different type of international standard on technical subjects, right? Including information system, information security, encryption standard. Even the one we talk about, is it last week or the week before, where we talk about although it's not done by ISO, the OSI model, but it's something similar. It's a standard that is developed by an organization to make sure that networking device complies to so that they can be able to communicate. So the same thing here for ISO. So ISO come up with these standards, okay? Because, for example, I as a customer, I don't know if my bank, if they have what they said they have. My bank can tell me, oh, we have the best of firewall, we have the best of server, we have the best of security, your data is secure with us. But I don't know. How do I know? I don't know, right? So that is why ISO or some other body come up with a type of standard and framework that organizations need to comply to. And for organizations to comply to them, you have to pay these organizations. So they will come, they will evaluate your environment after you have, because they have a checklist which you are supposed to have for you to be able to know, for you to be said to have a strong information security management system, right? So now, if you don't have those things in place, you can just tell your customer, we have the best security, blah blah blah, and nobody will know. if you are lying or if you are saying the truth. Okay, so but for you to be able to show that, okay, I actually have what I said I have, so that is why it is important to have such bodies to make sure that if you have this certificate, so this ISO will come, they will carry out an audit on all your infrastructure, because there's a checklist which you're supposed to have, and then if you're able to meet all those information on the checklist, then you'll be able to say, okay, you are certified, you now have ISO so number certified. So whenever your customers see it, even though they did not come to verify it, but because ISO is a trusted entity which doesn't compromise on standard, so you will be rest assured that okay, yeah, so this organization actually have it. So that's why for example, if you are for example a data center or a bank or a telecom, it's part of the requirement for you to have this standard, so that clients will be able to know that okay, their information is actually secure with you. So just like I said, there are a whole lot of ISO standards, which I have like 5 of them here. So we have ISO 22301, which outlines how organizations can ensure business continuity and protect themselves from disaster. So if you have this, if you see any organization that is certifying this, you know that they have a very strong disaster recovery plan, and they should be able to recover from any type of disaster. So this is the king, and this is the one you get to see most, 27001 and 27002 as cybersecurity professional. Those are the most common and the most popular that you come across in cybersecurity. Okay, so it's actually a standard that provides a framework for managing sensitive company information. So it includes requirement for developing an information security management system, implementing controls, conducting risk assessment, and stuff like that. So it's actually they call it, it's actually I call it the king of the standard, because you get to see it almost everywhere. And yes, so we have people that are even just specialized in this particular one because it's one of the most popular. Okay, and then we have ISO 27002. Provides guidance and recommendation on how to implement security control within an organization. So it supports tools 27001. So this is more like implementing security controls. So they are 2001 and 2002 are mostly done hand in hand. Okay, and then the other one we have here is 27031, which is for ICT business continuity, which is a bit different from this one. This one is general business continuity and disaster recovery, while this one is ICT business continuity. So we have a whole lot of them. There are more than this, so I just stick to these ones. Okay, so the next framework, so ISO is actually very common in this part of the world, Africa, Europe, and the like. But NIST is actually more common in the in America, in North America. Yes, North America. That's US, Canada, and the like. So they make use of NIST. So it's quite, I won't say it's quite similar to the ISO also. It's also a voluntary framework. So if you don't have ISO, it's not a must for you to have them. It's not mandatory. It's voluntary. But there are some regulators now that will now make it mandatory for you. Okay, so that they will know that you have these things. But it's mainly voluntary. So it also provides a standard for guidelines, best practices for managing cybersecurity risk. So it helps organizations to identify, assess, and manage their cybersecurity risks in a structured and repeatable manner. So these are things you will come across. They are also large on their own, and they take a whole lot to implement, right? So you may need to be familiar, depending on where you find yourself, but you need to be familiar with the different standard, so that you'll be. But what they do is similar. So they have standard, they have guidelines, they have best practices, they have a checklist of best practices, of controls, of of equipment that you must implement in the organization for you to improve your cybersecurity posture. So that's what they all do. So now to bring it to the local environment, we have in Nigeria, we also have a standard framework, most especially for banks and other financial institutions to comply to. This is a framework set by the Central Bank of Nigeria. So this is a framework that set the minimum cybersecurity standard that DMB means deposit money banks and PSPS means payment service providers must implement. So you may be wondering, so in the country also the Nigerian government is also making sure that we are protected. Our information, our money is protected in the banks. So the CBN have this particular framework in which it also tells banks on what they need to do, what the minimum level of cybersecurity standard that they must implement in their banks. Okay, so and this came to effect in January 1, 2009. So this helps organizations to be able to withstand cyber threats and maintain normal operation despite cyber attacks. So it has a whole lot of components. It's about 60 something pages and it's available online. Okay, you can just search for this and then you're going to see it. So all the requirements are there, even though the ISOs, the NISTs, all the documents are online, right? You can download them, you can read them, you can go through them so that you'll be able to know what you are expected to have in your organization for you to be said that you are compliant, right? So also there's another one also by the CBN, very similar to the first one, and it's been it's a framework for other financial institutions. Before we used to have just deposit money banks, our commercial banks and the likes, but now we are having other type of financial institutions. We are having all these Momo, we are having all these Kuda, Pampe, blah blah blah. So it's very important for them also to be compliant, and then CBN also came up with another framework that they must also comply to, which is effective from January 2023. It's also online. You can get to see them and then you go through them so that you get to understand what those documents are saying and what they are required. But that is what they are all about. And then the next thing we are going to be talking about is policy. So policy is formed by applicable and specify which standard and guideline the organization will follow. So from this, for example, if you are using an ISO or if you are using an NIST, they have standards for password, right? So they have standards for how you manage your server. They have standard for what you should do if you are implementing patch. They have standard for change management and stuff like that. So it's from those standards now that you now go there and and then you make your policy. So but your policy is going to be broad, so just like the password policy that I explained previously, so that we save time. So it gives you context and a strategic direction, and it also allows you to set your priority. So policies are used to moderate and control decision making and ensure compliance. So for example, just like I said, if you have a password policy, for example, you have to implement it to ensure compliance. You say the policy states that your password must be minimum of 12 characters. Your password must be changed after every 30 days. Your password must be this, your password must be that. Your password, you must not share your password, you must not write it down and other stuff like that. So those are the policies, right? So policy tells you what you need to do. And then policy are also often written at many levels across the organization. So you can have different type of policy, just like I said. You can have HR policy, you can have finance and accounting policy, how you get order, you make payment to client. You can have your security policy. You can have different type of policies depending on your organization. So policy are implemented or carried out by people, And for that, someone must expand the policy from statement of intent and decision into step-by-step instruction. So which is the procedure. So because policy is broad and they are usually broad, right? So for people to be able to know how to actually carry out that policy, then you need to break it down into a step-by-step instruction, which is going to be the procedure, which is going to be the last thing we are going to talk about today. So just like I said, you can have different type of policy at different level. So these are type of cybersecurity policies that you can have. You can have intrusion prevention policy, live update policy, application and device control policy. You can have all the days where all your bring your device can come in. For example, for you to be able to access the organization resource with your mobile phone, there need to be a device control policy, which will say that okay, your device must have a password. If you go out of this particular location, you cannot have access to data and other stuff like that. So we have host integrity policy, change management policy, information security policy, access control policy. You can have a whole lot of policy, right? But procedure defines explicit the repeated activities necessary to accomplish a specific task. So they provide supporting data, decision criteria, or explicit knowledge. So for example now, so just like I said in the case of the password, so repeatable, because you have to change your password every 30 days. It's a repeatable activities that must happen on or before every 30 days, right? So you may need some guide on how to do that. So procedure can tell you that okay, if you want to change your password, you click on setting, you see password, then you click on password, then you see change password, and then you can now put your 8 characters. Make sure you have uppercase, lowercase, and special character, and then you save it. Do you understand? So that's procedure. So we already have the policy that tell us what to do, then procedure tell us how to do it. So that is just the difference. So procedure can address one time or infrequent action. It can address frequent action depending on the type of organization you find yourself. So properly documenting procedures and training your personnel on how to locate and follow them is necessary to derive maximum organizational benefit from the procedure. So just like I said, you need to just like what I explained now. So instead of I want to change my password now, for example, someone like you may be able to do it, but just imagine someone that doesn't understand tech very much and it's in your environment. Instead of that person having to call IT every now and then that my password has expired, I cannot log in, or how do I change my password, you can just document it and keep it in a place whereby the person can just go there, click on it, go through the instruction, then follow it. So that's what this particular part is saying. So you also need to train them on how to know where to go to. You may also need to train them on how to do it for the first time, and then you now give them instruction on how to carry it out and then how to follow the instruction, so that you'll be able to have maximum organization benefit. You not have I don't know this, I do not understand this, I don't get this and that. So that is what all this thing, that is what it's all about. So you need to understand that the main thing here is that regulation and laws are binding on organization, is made by the government, right? Regulations and law are made by the government, which organization must comply to. If they don't comply to it, there is a fine that is attached to it, right? So that's clear. Then standards, because you may not know how to comply to those regulations, standard helps you to tell you what you need to do. It's a checklist. It's in form of like a checklist or requirement that you must have in your organization for you to be able to comply to that particular standard, and then you can be certified for it, which you can now show your customer. And then policy is a set of rules by the management now. So you can see the management or the governance of the company come up with policy, and then procedure is how to now I'm rushing because I see that we have 1 hour for this training and it's going to expire very soon. So procedure is a step by step on how to achieve this policy, right? So this is a knowledge check. you can see, I'll just explain all these things, and then you can see what this number 1, number 2 is saying, and then the answer is on the next slide. So I believe you may, based on what we have done now, I'm sure you should be able to answer this number 1 to 4, which is just here. I have the response here already. Is the meeting still up? Okay, so let me check because I'm on full screen. Okay, yeah, it's still up. Yeah, okay, so let me go back to this. So let's see how we can so let me just give you a bit of time for you in your mind to be able to know. So which one do you think it is? Number 1 should be what? They said dash at the highest level of governance document in an organization. So you have to be mindful of the way the question is asked, so that you don't mistake it for another thing, because they can be quite similar. So they said dash highest level governance document in an organization, usually approved and issued by management, usually to support a compliance initiative. So let's see. So the other one is security practitioner would need step-by-step instruction to complete a provisioning task, might use a what to ensure they are performing the task in a consistent manner. So then the third one is framework or dash. This one is even simple. Framework, as giving the answer out, are often offered by third-party organization and cover specific advisory or compliance objective. Then number 4, usually mandated by government agency. Government agency is different from governance. Governance is more of management, whereby government agency is what they are, government agency, and a set of rules everyone must comply with. So if you agree with me, you will know that number 1 is going to be policy, number 2 is going to be procedures, 3 is going to be standard, and 4 is going to be regulation. Yeah, thank you. 4 is going to be regulation. So let's see. As we can see, policy, procedure, standard, laws, or regulation. So it's important. So the main aim of this particular module is to know the difference between them and also understand the relationship between the 4 of them. So this is set by government or regulatory body in maybe a regional, national, or international, or multinational, and then it comes with a fine. Okay, while standard is set by third-party vendors, they are usually advisory or voluntary, right? They're usually advisory or voluntary, but they help you to achieve this one. They help you comply to this because they have a minimum checklist. They have a requirement that you must comply to for your information system to be, for you to be compliant, or for you to be see that you have this certificate for that particular standard. So that's that about that. Then the next one that should come is the policy. So from this standard now you can derive your policy to secure. So this is going to be done by the governance of that particular organization, that is the management. So they will come up with policy, which can be from the standard or maybe from the objective of the organization, and then come up with this policy to ensure that our information system is secure, or maybe you have a proper disaster recovery plan, or you have a proper change management plan and stuff like that. And then procedure is what you now need to do. So if it's a change management, now you can say, okay, you train people before you implement a new system and other stuff like that. Then procedure is how you are going to do it. It's the step-by-step guide on how you are going to carry that out. So I believe that's clear. And then we have another knowledge check here. So can we try this? You can unmute and let me see. I think this should be a little bit more interesting and confusing a bit than the first one. So let's see. So IPA is what? It's a federal what? So IPA is what? Anyone wants to try? IPA is a federal what?
Sir, please come again with your question, sir.
So it's there, the screen. I can't. Can you see my screen? Is the class still active? Oh, the meeting has ended.